Well, I think we'll get started right on time. It's great to see that everyone has joined very promptly. So thank you so much. We're delighted to have hundreds of you joining and tuning in today. My name's Natasha and I'm from the marketing team. And before we get started, Paul, if you can go to the next slide for me. We wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture. We pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. We extend that respect to our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Thank you. So very excited today for this webinar. I'm joined by Paul and Shannon. They're both the co-founders of Autism From The Inside. It's an organization that provides a safe space for the autism community to connect, learn, and grow. And they offer a range of courses, events, and coaching services, as well as running a highly successful YouTube channel with over 400,000 subscribers. So it's quite amazing. Paul is an aerospace engineer who was diagnosed with autism at 30. And Paul is also completing a very exciting project at the moment. I'm not sure if we're allowed to say anything, but I'll just keep that there. Shannon is also autistic and she holds a master's in autism studies. She's also currently completing a master's of counselling, and she combines knowledge with her personal experience of parenting and neurodivergent teen to support families, teachers, and parents in understanding and celebrating autism. So we just also wanted to make a note that this webinar today is accredited. So after completing the webinar, you'll receive a link to a short quiz based on the content that you've learnt today. And then once you've passed the quiz, we'll email you a copy of your certificate, which contains CPD points. And also a copy of the recording will be sent to you tomorrow. Thank you. So I'd pass it over to Paul and Shannon. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much for that intro, Natasha. So yeah, I'm on Wurundjeri land today. So great to see you all online from wherever you're dialing in from. And I assume the secret project you were referring to is the book that I'm writing at the moment, Unlocking Your Emotional Brain. So that's not a secret. But today we are here to talk about physical and psychological safety. So Shannon, do you want to give us a quick overview of what we'll be going through today?
Certainly. Welcome, everybody. It's fantastic to be here. This particular webinar will focus on physical safety, psychological safety, respect and inclusion, empowerment and autonomy, steps to building trust and strategies for reducing anxiety, and tailored support plans and feedback mechanisms. So the overall theme for today is that psychological safety promotes a sense of belonging and inclusivity, and it allows diverse perspectives, abilities, and strengths to flourish. With questions and answers, we will hold a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. You can ask your questions, offer answer to discussion questions, share your experiences. Participation is optional. But if you could hold your questions to the end of the webinar, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, and of course, we love to see everyone's chats while we're going through. So feel free to use the webinar chat to keep this as interactive as possible. Okay, so before we jump into the content, I'd like us to do a really, really quick grounding empathy exercise. So I invite everyone to just take one deep breath and see if you can tap into what does it feel like to feel safe? When you feel safe, what's that like? You're secure, you feel protected, you feel looked after, everything is fine. How does that feel like? And now, what about the opposite? What does it feel like to get that unsafe feeling where things are just, there's a little bit of tension in the environment. Maybe there's a cause for anxiety. Maybe things are a bit unstable. It's a little bit threatening. How do you feel when your environment is a little bit unsafe? Right. So all of these great comments in the chat: anxious, scared, stress, heightened, alert. Great. So this is clearly a very significant topic that we're talking about today. And so let's just bear that in mind, how directly we can experience these emotions as we go through this content.
So personal safety is that feeling of being safe. So you just experienced it in the empathy exercise that Paul just conducted. It's important to be aware that different people have different tolerance levels. Not everyone needs the same particular elements in an environment to make them feel safe. But when it comes to feeling safe and secure, it doesn't matter if everybody else feels safe. The litmus test and the benchmark that we use is it matters if you feel personally safe. So there are three things that contribute to workplace safety, and that's a physical sense of safety. The first you're probably quite familiar with, things like codes of conduct and safety plans. They're designed to be able to prevent accidents and injuries. They help us in case of an emergency. And we follow some set instructions associated with either an activity or an environment. And they help create that physical safety. We need to carry around any essential safety information in emergencies. So, for example, information about allergies or medical conditions. And it's always easier to prevent danger and confrontation than it is to try and manage it afterwards. So a short discussion at the beginning of a meeting with a client about what we do in case of an emergency, what are your priorities, what do we need to focus on, can help establish that physical safety every time you work together.
So physical safety is not just about the environment, it's also about the people in the environment. I'm much more likely to feel physically safe if I know the other people in the environment also value safety. So that's why a lot of these procedures and protocols, if I know that everyone is on the same page about how important this is, that's a significant way to feel safe. From an autistic perspective, one of the things in an environment that can lead me to feel unsafe is around the sensory environment. Is the sensory environment going to be anxiety provoking? Is it going to be overwhelming? Am I going to have enough control over it so that I can regulate myself? So over and above all of your typical sort of mainstream safety threats in a workplace or in a school environment or any other kind of environment, from an autistic point of view, very often this extra thing of the social aspect and the sensory environment play a really big role.
So this particular slide is about creating psychological safety. And I know if you're a little bit like me, I was a little bit new to this topic when my son started school, and I wasn't really sure what psychological safety meant. So I found this particular diagram that breaks it down into 4 different quadrants. I'm going to start with learner safety. And that just really means that you're free to ask questions, to make mistakes and not feel judged, to be able to experiment with doing something a little bit differently. And learner safety allows us to feel physically safe, but also accepted. Challenger safety is interesting because that's about being comfortable when it comes to speaking up and expressing your ideas. Now, often that can be difficult to create in an environment. But the benefit of doing so is that you can identify any changes or any problems, and you can feel confident to share that information. Collaborator safety is when you're working with other people. So when you're working with a client, when you're working with other support workers, you can have an open discussion. You can have constructive debate that's objective, it's not personal. And you're able to interact with colleagues in a positive and secure way. The last quadrant really kind of is the umbrella for all of the rest, and that's inclusion safety. Because if you have this, it's possible to have the whole umbrella of psychological safety. Inclusion safety means that you're valued, that you treat people fairly, that you feel that your experience and your ideas matter, and that regardless of your title or your position in that environment, you are safe and secure and respected. And that you can openly contribute if you feel that you want to. And all of those things together are what help to create psychological safety.
So I would definitely emphasize this last point around inclusion. You can probably sum up a lot of what we talk about around psychological safety, thinking about inclusion and belonging. So the threat of physical safety is a threat to my physical body, my physical well-being. The threat in psychological safety is a threat to my social well-being, my belonging to a group. If that is threatened, that feels very unsafe. And as Shannon mentioned in the beginning, the real litmus test here is, do you feel safe? I would go as far as to say, if you do not feel safe, you're not safe. Part of creating psychological safety is actually focusing on that feeling. What is it about the environment that is leading me to think, I'm just a little bit scared to put up my hand at the moment? I'm just a little bit scared to speak my mind at the moment. I feel like I'm sticking my neck out. It feels unsafe. And so that feeling of I don't want to stick my neck out, that's kind of what we're talking about when we're referring to psychological safety. So the punishment that can hurt our feeling of belonging is essentially negative social conditioning. Will people judge me? Will people give me weird looks? Will people avert their eyes and stop talking to me and start ostracizing me because I've done something that has let me stick out and kind of offended the group in some way? So from an autistic perspective, this is incredibly important when it comes to masking and unmasking. If I feel like my belonging to a group is contingent on doing what everyone else is doing, then there's a lot of pressure and a lot of stress to perform in that environment. And the fear is that if I accidentally step out of line, if I let people see the mask, or my mask starts to crack because I'm getting too tired or I can't keep it up anymore, then I feel like my position in the group is under threat. My very belonging is being threatened. So weirdly, I find I'm the most safe and the most secure in a group when I can deliberately do something different and know that I'm still included anyway. So from that perspective, what we're talking about is it all comes down to this inclusion and how to help someone to feel as though there is nothing they can do to accidentally exclude themselves from the group, because we care about you, you belong here, you can feel psychologically safe.
So another core element of creating psychological safety is respect and inclusion. And interestingly, the two small circles kind of at the top of the overall circle, are the two that hold them together. That's respect and trust. If you can create those within a working environment or a client environment, then all of the rest should follow. So we're looking at things for an inclusive work environment, like a sense of belonging, as Paul's just said. Access to opportunity. You've got the opportunity to do something new or to try something in a different way. You are rewarded equitably and recognised for the contribution that you make. Your value is celebrated. If we're looking at appreciating individual attributes, that again contributes to psychological safety. Cultural competence, so that's recognising different cultures, maybe the challenges that those cultures have had to overcome or experience, and to automatically have that unconditional respect. And that in turn helps you to create purposeful and meaningful work. But again, all of that is bracketed. An inclusive and safe psychological and practical work environment involves respect and trust.
So very often the consequences are not easily seen. So, for example, if I don't go to work drinks at the end of the day with my colleagues on a Friday, am I free to do that, or are there going to be negative unintended consequences at the end of the day? If I have trouble listening to people in meetings and I really need written instructions so that I can participate and so that I can process the information that I need for my work, is it okay to lean into that and to get the accessibility requirements that I might need in a workplace? Or will there be negative repercussions for that down the track where somehow I'm not seen as valuable as my other colleagues because I need this additional thing? So the autistic experience has to navigate so many of these really little concerns that I'm just worried that if I ask for what I need, then I'm going to lose the respect. I'm going to lose the sense of inclusion that I deserve in a team. So to give you a really quick example of this, let's do a really quick imaginative exercise. So imagine we're all in a room and we're all in kindergarten, right? And the teacher says, "Good news, children. We're going to spend the rest of the day playing with Play-Doh," right? You can do whatever you want. Come to the front, grab a handful. It's going to be a really fun afternoon. And everyone else looking around thinks, "Wow, this is fantastic. I love Play-Doh. This is going to be a really fun afternoon." Except the one little girl who doesn't like the touch and smell and feel of Play-Doh. Just from a sensory point of view, I just don't like touching it, right? Maybe you can imagine that. For most of us, it's fine. Most people would really love that. Most children would love that. But if you happen to have a sensory profile that's different to everyone around you, suddenly this very innocuous situation becomes a threat that feels unsafe. So let's take a tiny little twist on that, right? Just to make it a little bit more visceral. Imagine we're all in a room and I have a bucket of cockroaches and I say, "Hey everyone, we're going to have a really fun afternoon. Everyone come to the front and grab an armful of cockroaches. They're going to be everywhere. It's a little bit messy. They'll be in your hair and in your clothes, and that's fun. We can have a shower later. Everything's going to be fine. Let's have a really fun afternoon." And you look around the room and everyone else except you thinks that's the most brilliant idea the teacher has ever had, right? So these are the kinds of unseen challenges that can very easily present themselves that we need to work with to try and make sure that respect and inclusion are a given. And even if I have to put my hand up and say, "Look, I'm really sorry, I would prefer to say no thanks to the cockroaches, thanks. That there's no negative social repercussions for that later.
Another element of psychological safety is how we create empowerment and autonomy. So, why is it important? Because we allow individuals with support needs the space and opportunity to make informed decisions, to exercise control over their lives. And as Paul said, if they want to be the one person who's not participating in that experiment, there's no value judgment on that. There's no pressure. And it can be even soft or subtle pressure, like, go on, give it a go. It's really good to get out of your comfort zone. That sort of pressure can inadvertently make someone feel unsafe. So it's important that we understand that empowerment and autonomy encompass a range of different things, and it includes the physical, the emotional, the social, and economic empowerment as well. And by promoting self-determination and autonomy, that just means individual choice. We can help our clients develop the skills, but in particular, they can develop confidence and resilience to navigate different challenges and to pursue their aspirations, because they realize that with this person-centered service, their dignity, your partnership with them, their culture, which is one of trust and safety, your accountability, and your integrity are all coming together via a positive communication highway to create this level of autonomy and empowerment.
So one of the things that is a little bit challenging to understand is how encouragement can sometimes turn into pressure, which can turn into a threat. So an analogy I often use for this is I like to go hiking, right? And it involves a long walk, and you end up going to the very top of the mountain, and then you stand on a rock at the top of the mountain, and you can see out over the valley, and it's really nice. Except it's not always that safe, right? Like, how if I'm up there by myself, I would feel really safe standing on top of this rock at the edge of the cliff. But if there was someone pushing me closer to the edge of the cliff, saying, go on, take a little bit, get a little bit closer, just like look over the edge, suddenly I would feel extremely unsafe. So maybe you've noticed this with the people with people in your own life, that sometimes even a tiny little bit of pressure can trigger an unsafe response, trigger a defense mechanism, which is basically, someone is pushing me towards this cliff edge. I need to stop everything that I'm doing and push back against them because I don't feel safe at the moment. And so weirdly, paradoxically, the safest place to be, the safest way to support someone is to say, I'm here, I'm ready to help pull you back into your comfort zone whenever you need, which means that you're safe to explore now. I'm putting the power and autonomy into your hands to explore as much as you want. And at any moment, you can jump straight back into your comfort zone. I'll even help pull you away from that cliff edge back to where you feel really, really safe. And again, paradoxically, having that really safe base allows people to test their limits, to take one step out of their comfort zone, knowing that they're not ever too far away from a safe place to retreat to. So, what was I going to say with this one? Yeah, so if I have a thought on that, I'll come back, but that's where my thoughts ended with that one.
Building trust, of course, is incredibly important for psychological safety. You need to be able to trust the people that you work with, the people that in your trusted circle of support. And there are a multitude of ways to do that. As Paul said, one of the best ways is to offer that support and comfort, which then allows someone the freedom if they want to explore, if they want to risk. And if they don't, there's no negative pressure or negative feedback for not taking a risk. Sometimes we're more risk averse than others, and that fluctuates depending on a whole range of different factors. But in creating trust is incredibly important in your relationships. So one of them is to obviously be honest, admit when you're wrong, honor your commitments. And that can be something really small, such as being on time. If you're not going to be on time, give it a window of time so that the other person has certainty that you're still coming. That's a little example of a micro commitment. Communicating effectively. Now that means whatever is effective for the client. So if that's best written, verbal, or if you want a role play to illustrate something, that effective communication is a choice that you make to develop trust. Be helpful, show that you care, show that you register how they're feeling and how they're genuinely feeling. Not the polite, how are you? I'm great. How are you? We all know that that's a social reciprocity that we do, but it doesn't necessarily reflect how we are. So be prepared if someone says, I'm not okay, and think about how you might want to respond to that. Be free to stand up for what is right and be transparent. So if you have a particular goal or a particular structure, make sure you share it. So that my goal for doing this is so that we have fun. And so that somebody feels that, oh, okay, well, their goal is not to necessarily challenge me or maybe even test me. There's a lot of uncertainty when it comes around behavior and what is actually driving that. So sometimes being transparent and honest and open and vulnerable is the best way of building trust and ensuring that the communication is a positive two-way model of communication.
So building on our previous slide around autonomy and empowerment, that's one of the things that builds trust the most, is knowing that the person I'm with is not going to try and take away my own autonomy, try and take away my own choice. So in addition to the previous slide, showing someone that you're going to respect it immediately if they say no is a really powerful way to build trust. And it's even possible to go a step further than this. If you hear a maybe, you can check in. Hey, I know you just said okay just now, but how are you really? Like, are you really okay to do this? Because you sounded a little bit unsure, and I want to make sure that you're doing what you want to do because I'm empowering you with your own autonomy right now. And so that additional level of check-in means that even when I'm getting overwhelmed, I can trust that the situation isn't going to get away from me just because I lose my words and can't ask people to slow down. I've got a trusted person who's going to check in with me, notice the signs, notice even the non-verbal signs that I might be struggling or I might be reaching my limit, and check in with me to give me that extra time and space to check in with myself. So sometimes when things are really busy around me, it's easy to get caught up with that and forget to check in how I'm doing. So having someone else give me that space means that I'm more likely to notice my own personal boundaries, more likely to notice if I'm getting to the edge where I have to say, actually, that's enough for today. I really think I should dial it back. So one really powerful way of building trust is to check in with someone's boundaries constantly, and provide positive feedback when someone tells you about their boundaries. If someone says, actually, I'd really prefer not to do the whole cockroach experiment today. If I say, great, I'm really thankful that you told me. Thank you so much for telling me. Good job. Make sure you tell me again next time. You did a really good job telling me what you want in this situation. That's positive reinforcement for good communication of boundaries. The opposite is a slightly negative reinforcement, which is when I say no, thank you, the answer is, oh, come on, are you sure? Do you want to reconsider? So instead of having a negative conditioning, we want to replace that with positive conditioning. The final thing I'll say about trust is that another way of thinking about trust is predictability. How do I know I can trust you? I can trust you because you're predictable and I know what you're going to do, probably because you've done it before, probably because you've done it before enough times that I'm confident that you'll do it again next time. So that's why really little things like Shannon mentioned about telling someone if you're going to be a few minutes late, right? That type of thing builds trust because it shows that if there's going to be something that is not predictable, you're going to communicate it to me and everything's going to be okay. Maybe you know someone who asks a million questions about what's going to happen next, right? Why do people ask so many questions? A big part of it is because I need to know what's going to happen so that I can feel safe, so that I can predict the situation and predict what I'm going to need in the situation. So if I trust someone to look out for me and look after me, I don't really need to know as many of those details because I trust that the person, my guide, my mentor, is going to look out for me in the situation. So everything is going to be okay because I trust them. Whereas getting the 1 million questions is sometimes a bit of a sign that a person feels unsafe. And so we can look into what's causing that, where that's coming from, and what does the person need to feel the trust and to feel safe in that situation. Oh, Shannon, you're on mute. Yeah.
Reducing anxiety is important for creating psychological safety, as is just as much as the trust component that Paul just illustrated. It's important to know how to recognize anxiety, and that can be in yourself as well as others. So sometimes it's a memory issue, sometimes it's overthinking, sometimes it's a panic attack, sometimes it's just needing reassurance. So, okay, are we okay today? Is this going to be the same as what we did last week? Sometimes it has very physical repercussions. It can be upset stomach issues. It can be headaches. It can be trouble breathing. It can be a really rapid heartbeat. All of these things are signs or symptoms of anxiety. And sometimes they can be within the normal realm of anxiety, which is something that everybody experiences. And sometimes it can be an autistic level of anxiety, which can be a little bit stronger, and it can be based on not feeling psychologically safe. And what often happens when it is a consistent level of high anxiety is that instead of our body responding in terms of fight or flight to danger factors, what happens is we start responding to perceived threats or perceived worries or fears. So you mightn't actually be under attack, but you're still feeling under attack. And that can have all of the symptoms of anxiety that we can see on the screen there. So if we understand what anxiety looks like, we then want to look at 4 core strategies for managing stress and anxiety. Now, these are broken into 4 different groups. And the first is attention, and they're centering techniques. The second is expressive, and they can be creative strategies. Reflection, and their exploration strategies. And healthy lifestyle values. Now, depending on what kind of stress or what kind of anxiety you're experiencing, or what has potentially triggered that stress or anxiety, that will inform you as to what kind of strategy you'd like to try. Not all strategies work for every situation, and it can very much be a trial and error to see what's most effective. But it's good to know that there are these 4 quadrants and core strategies that you can turn to. So something for attention can be visualization. And often that can be combined with breathing. And that can be, I'd like you to take a few moments to do some deep breathing. And I'd like you to think about a time when you felt really positive, a time when you felt really comfortable and safe. And can you describe that for me? That's an example of a visualization technique. For expressive things, it can be working on a project or physical movement. That will give an immediate energy response. So whether it's something that's a particular interest of yours, or physical movement, which can give that adrenaline and endorphins and that positive sensory feedback. For reflection strategies, these are sometimes best after you've managed that anxiety. These strategies can help us to avoid the anxiety from happening again, or perhaps avoiding that particular trigger. So that can be self-monitoring, like I felt particularly stressed today. What else did I do today? How did I interact with other people? Did I get enough sleep? Any of those things you can note down and then have a look for any patterns. I'm particularly stressed on a Monday, for example. For a healthy lifestyle, again, it's looking at those values for psychological safety and building that positive relationship. Is it time to maybe check in and be vulnerable? Is it time to have honest communication? Is it time to speak up? Is it time to talk to others and get their feedback? So all of those different strategies will help with anxiety, and they'll all help with different types of anxiety. But what will be unique is each individual client will have strategies that work best for them. So in that regard, it's up to us to be able to look and revisit anxiety and look and revisit these strategies and see what personally works for us the best.
So when talking about anxiety, it's really helpful to separate the stress and the stressor, right? So if there's something in my environment that is causing stress and anxiety, that's the stressor, right? So maybe the lights are too bright. Maybe there's a lot of noise. Maybe there's an assignment coming up tomorrow, or a big event tomorrow that I'm actually really stressed about. So that's the stressor. And very often it's difficult to manage anxiety and stress if the stressor is still acting on me. If there's a tiger in front of me, it doesn't help to just sit in a chair and say, how about I have a few deep breaths? Because the tiger is still making me stressed. Every time I look at it, I'm scared of it. So the first step in managing anxiety is to look for the stressor, look for what is causing the anxiety, so that we can do our best to remove those things. Very often in an autistic context, it's the sensory environment. Or the other really big one is the social environment. Is my social environment a safe place, or is it a stressful, threatening place? This is one of the reasons that so many autistic people have social anxiety, because I'm in a place with other people and the other people are not predictable. The other people might be suddenly hostile to me in a way that I don't always understand. An analogy I often share is the autistic life often feels like navigating a minefield, right? A minefield of sensory stuff and executive processing stuff and other, like lots of other things that other people can't see, right? I can see these dangers and I'm sort of trying to avoid them myself by taking a bit of a weird path. And so that's stressful enough as it is. The thing that adds double to that stress and anxiety is the fact that the other people that I'm dealing with don't always see the mines in the minefield that I'm trying to avoid. So simply acknowledging that there are hidden mines, hidden challenges that people might be facing, and letting them, going back to this idea about empowerment and autonomy, letting someone tell me what those challenges are for them, helps to make the social environment a little bit safer, which is taking away one of the stresses that can potentially cause some unnecessary anxiety. Also, the stuff that we've been talking about in this webinar so far, it's applicable to everyone at all ages. The difference when working with children is that they might need more guidance to understand their own emotions and more guidance in terms of figuring out strategies that are likely going to work. But even as an adult, having a trusted person can make a huge difference in reducing anxiety. Imagine I'm going, through a foreign country and I have a tour guide who's completely looking after me. That's a huge stress off because there's someone I trust who's looking after me.
So the final information slide today is about tailoring support plans and feedback. And it's particularly important because, as we've mentioned, each client has their own unique physical, social, emotional, companionship, mental health needs and goals. Everyone is different. So if we tailor our strategies and our relationships and the way that we create psychological safety to best fit our client, that's the ideal outcome. Now, how would we do that? And this is a cycle of reflective practice. And it's something that doesn't take very long. It's something that you become conscious and aware of, and you might make a few notes after working with a client. So you'll have a bit of a description as to what happened, your feelings at the time, and maybe your client's feelings. You can then evaluate what went well and what was maybe something you'd like to improve on for next time. Then take a moment just to think about the situation. And what was the sensory environment like? Were there any other factors? Was my client particularly upset today or particularly excited today? Because that could have impacted how things occurred. Once you've analysed some of the triggers or the situation, the people that are involved, what are the conclusions? What have you learnt today? What lessons can you take away for the next time you engage with either this client or this friend or with your family? And then create an action plan. Mistakes are inevitable and are often referred to as first attempts in learning. And so mistakes are to be expected. This particular tailored support plan and reflective praxis allows us to turn those first attempts in learning to genuine and ongoing supportive learning. And by doing that, we create an action plan. So this time the sensory environment wasn't comfortable. I realized there were noise and maybe some lighting challenges, or maybe there was just a lot happening in that area and we needed a quieter space. Going forward, the next time you do the same activity or the next time you catch up, you can put those environmental changes into practice. And by doing that, you can describe what happens. So what happened? Oh, well, actually, I was working with my son and he was a lot more receptive to engaging in what was going on. And he was a lot happier to talk to me. He wasn't quite so withdrawn, or perhaps he seemed to really enjoy, had a really strong emotional response to this activity. So this cycle of reflective practice helps us every day, working with clients, learning about different people, learning about our workplace, learning about our families, and especially with the trial and error that goes with supporting unique individual family members and clients with their own unique profile. This allows us to reflect on each person and to be able to learn about each person and engage with them as a unique individual. And that's a real strength that really goes to the heart of psychological safety. So tailoring support plans are important because each client has their own unique physical, social, emotional, companionship, mental health needs, and their own goals as well.
So I really love the irony of finishing with this point. Like once we've learned all of this stuff about how to create safety, the next step is to forget everything you've learned and focus on the person in front of you and let them teach you from a blank slate almost. So very often people ask me, what is autism? What do I need to do to support an autistic person? Ultimately, we can learn a lot about safety, learn a lot about sensory needs, learn a lot about other kinds of support. And at the end of the day, sometimes the most helpful thing to do is to just stop and listen and pay attention to the human being in front of you. What are they responding to? What are they communicating to you verbally, non-verbally, intellectually, emotionally? And really use their real-time feedback to help get a sense of what is likely to be helpful, what is likely to be unhelpful. And this is especially a good idea with children as well, because they're still learning to communicate their needs in a coherent way. So we need to really pay attention to look at the non-verbal things and the emotional cues that are happening in the background. So the point that I would really like to finish on here, going right back to the start, is that if a person does not feel safe, I would argue that they're not safe, right? Psychological safety is about feeling safe so that it literally speaks to our nervous system and we can calm our whole bodies and let go of that anxiety and feel empowered to actually step out of our comfort zone and do something and learn something new. So that's a really powerful ability to help someone to feel safe and comfortable to step out and learn something new. So that's the end of what we've got planned for today. So we'll move on to a question and discussion time. So thanks again for everyone who has been so active in the chat. And if you have a specific question for us, we've got about another 10 minutes or so now to answer any specific questions. Okay, Fiona asks, what examples do you have of these non-verbal communications? I'll throw over to you, Shannon, in a second, but the first thing that comes to mind for me is, what if someone goes silent? What does that mean? What if someone tenses up? What does that mean? What if someone is a bit hesitant before doing something? What does that mean? Like these are all signs of something happening. It might be a sign of I need more processing time, or it might be a sign of I'm a little bit unsure. I need some encouragement. So if we're looking for these kinds of nonverbal signs, there are going to be signs in my face and my body and my tone of voice that you can pick up on to say, oh, it seems like you're squinting a little bit with the lights. Would you like me to turn them down? Those types of things that are, on the one hand, really simple, but on the other hand, it's difficult for the person to verbalize an actual request. Is there anything we can do about the lights? Because when we get overtaken by fear or anxiety, the first thing that we lose is the ability to form words to actually express it.
So if I were to add to that, I'd say looking at all of the nonverbal elements. So they're things like facial expressions, they're things like body language, they can be gestures. Also, if someone is stimming, that's a sign that they're trying to regulate themselves. Stimming is a self-calming practice. It can be tone of voice, even for someone who's not verbal. They still can articulate in terms of tones, and tones tell a lot. One of the biggest challenges, though, can be when our tones and our actions aren't in sync. So, for example, my son has a very serious facial expression most of the time and quite a deep tone, which can imply that he's very serious or potentially angry. When you check in with him and he's actually not, that's how he is most comfortable engaging. So it can be really important to look holistically at the non-verbal communication. And especially if someone is shutting down, that is an immediate sign that they are not coping. There's nothing else, other information that we can add or engage with that's going to help that person, because their glass, if you think of it as a glass of water, it's already full. You can't pour more liquid into that glass. What you need to do is de-escalate things. So reduce sensory input, reduce interaction, increase calm, increase safety. And if we do that, you should see some physical, non-verbal reactions. So non-verbal communication is just as, if not sometimes more important than verbal communication, because it gives us an insight and subconscious look as to what's really going on.
And if someone is seeming aggressive while they're stimming, it's probably a sign that they're not coping. So that's all I'll say about that one for the moment. We also had another question around how to help specifically with sensory overload. And so there are three things that come to mind for me, even without knowing the specifics of the client. So actually four things. The first thing is to try and identify what type of sensory overload is happening. If you can, that's going to be really helpful. But if you're not sure, the first go-to thing would be to just reduce all sensory input. Just reducing input in general is often one way to help calm a person down. The next kind of strategy is to empower someone to be able to control it for themselves. So what that might look like is I've got my headphones, I can put them on, I can take them off, I can control the level so that I'm happy with it. And if you're really not sure and you have the ability to ask, we can always say, what do you think would be helpful in this situation? Or how about I turn the lights down? Would that be helpful? Maybe, maybe not.
There's a very quick question about, I guess, physical safety with an aggressive client who is potentially non-verbal. The most important thing is to come up with a safety plan, not when it's occurring, but prior to an event occurring, and to collaborate on it. So you need to come up with a safety plan, a safe space where the person can go. You need to have an agreed phrase that they will recognize, such as, I'm feeling unsafe. It's time for our safety plan. So that those verbal cues need to cue what's going on. Then we need to make sure that we reduce any potential harm, that we have a safety action plan in place. And Paul and I have talked about this with Autism from the Inside before. You might be able to structure a safety plan. And then there's practice and feedback. So when the person is non-aggressive, that's an opportunity to talk about what happened and how you felt and what you could do differently next time. And even if the person is non-verbal, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not able to understand what has occurred or how they're feeling. And I think that's one of the most important things to realize, is that there's often an element of shame after a meltdown, or being aggressive, and a feeling of disliking yourself because you're frustrated with that behaviour. So a safety plan that is prepared ahead in advance with different steps, with hard boundaries, is very important to making sure that you as a carer and your client both feel safe.
So we haven't specifically talked about meltdowns in this webinar. We have done other webinars where we go into that in more detail. But I think it is worth mentioning that part of the social safety in a situation, if I'm really struggling in a situation and I feel like I'm about to have a meltdown, or there's a chance I might have a meltdown, that can be a really scary, unsafe place to be. And so part of that is knowing that other people around me are going to notice the red flags and are going to help me to regulate before it gets too late. So there can be, in a meltdown situation, there's not only the physical side of it, but there's also, if I'm not happy with my own behavior, I might be, as Shannon mentioned, embarrassed as to how I came across, or embarrassed that I hurt someone, or legitimately regretting my own behavior because I didn't want to hurt them. I didn't want to hurt myself. I didn't want to go through this, but I really couldn't cope in that situation. And I was trying to get help and I couldn't communicate even though I wanted to communicate. So if there is a threat of an unsafe meltdown to occur, there is such a thing as a safe meltdown. In a situation where I can't hurt myself, I can't hurt anyone else, I know that I can just let go and let the emotions run through me and everything's fine. Some autistic adults actually describe a meltdown like in positive terms. It's really not, it's a really nice emotional release to have a meltdown and then feel better if it can be done in a safe environment. So I think the real key is what Shannon was saying before about having the plan in advance so that we don't get to an unsafe situation, or that when we get to a critical situation, we know what to do to de-escalate so that everyone in that situation is safe. We don't want any aggressive behavior to impact someone else. If the person is feeling aggressive, then they need the safe space so that they are confident that they're not going to hurt anyone, if that makes sense. And that's sort of, so that safety really works both ways with that.
Just adding to that, just popped it in the chat. Values-based communication and transparency really helps avoid aggression. So if somebody has had negative experiences in the past, then it's very important to stand as different from their past experience. So that might be as simple as saying, I want you to know that I genuinely care about you and I'm interested in knowing about you. I want you to know that I will make mistakes. When we make mistakes, I'm going to have a bit of a laugh at myself, or I might try something else to show you that it's okay. I want you to feel safe. I want you to feel respected. I understand that when you're melting down, it's not something you can help. I don't think you're being difficult. I don't think you're being unhelpful. I don't think of you as aggressive. I think of you as someone who is struggling. And when I see someone struggle and I see you struggle, what I want to do is help. So explaining that intention and that purpose can really, really help re-identify you as the person that they can trust and that they can have psychological safety with.
And in addition to that, the strategy Shannon just mentioned also safeguards the self-esteem of the individual in question, because we're showing them they don't need to feel ashamed, because we're modeling, I know you didn't mean to hurt me. I know you don't want to behave like this. I was working with a young person just recently who was having real trouble with emotional regulation in a school setting. And they were saying, I really don't want to be so silly and disruptive. Like it's hurting my reputation with my peers. It's getting me in trouble at school, all of these negative things. And so by acknowledging when you're having the conversation, I know you don't want all of these negative behaviors. What can we do so that, right, number one priority, so that you feel okay, so that you can do what you want to do? And that's why what Shannon was saying about tapping into the values can be a really powerful way to do that.
The other thing you can also do is you can look at empowering somebody by saying, well, if you're not comfortable with this particular behavior, let's talk about another behavior that you would feel comfortable with. And maybe, you can try different things. I want you to be your authentic self. I want you to be safe, and I want you to be you. But if you're not comfortable doing this particular thing, what could we do that's similar? What else is like? Like, if you had a friend who was doing this behavior, what would you recommend to them? What would you suggest? So you can always look at alternatives, but again, that's where autonomy and empowerment come into play, because you have to have the opportunity to choose what works best for you.
Okay, well, I think we're wrapping up there for today. So thanks so much, everyone, for your participation. Natasha, do you want to do a little close just for the info that people need to know at the end?
Yeah, thanks, guys. That was fantastic. So insightful. I learned so much, and I know there was such amazing feedback as well in the chat. Thank you, everyone. Just making a note again that you will receive 1 hour of CPD point accreditation. I'm just going to send a message in the chat now. It's the link to the quiz. But if you lose the link, just email events@mable.com.au. When you pass the quiz, we'll send you a copy of a certificate to the email address provided. Thank you, everyone. And stay tuned for upcoming webinars. But yeah, thanks for joining. We really appreciate it. And thanks, Paul and Shannon.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity.
It's been a great day. Thank you.
See you.
Okay, bye, everyone.